So the question that has been guiding what I've been doing for well over 20 years now is, why don't we have an economy that all can thrive in? And that's been at the heart of what we've been doing in Evolutesix now for well over a decade. And Marie summarized very nicely for her daughter Marie a couple of years ago, what is Evolutesix? Why are we doing what we're doing? Which is namely building businesses with people who love the planet and their children and want to protect and rebuild all life on Earth while being fair to everyone. So that's the heart of what we're up to. How we're doing it is what really matters. The how of building and regenerating in an economy is key to this. So a little bit of background to myself and why it is that I'm doing this. You know, you can see here 2023, every single day was at least 1 degree centigrade above pre-industrial temperatures. And in 2008, this was the big kick for me to leave Procter & Gamble, because it had become perfectly clear to me that despite P&G's purpose of improving people's lives, we were just not doing what needed to be done, dealing with things like climate change, resource, etc., at the scale and speed needed. And so I got thinking, and there are two elements of my background that are very relevant to everything that I've been doing since then. One of them is growing up in apartheid South Africa, being deeply embedded in a fundamentally unjust system where your right to engage in governance was a function of your skin color. Basically, if you had a white skin, you had full agency. If you did not have a white skin, you did not have full agency. And the level of agency loss was really a function of the shade of skin color. It was not just a simple on-off switch. And so I came into the past 2 decades of how do we build an economy that actually does work, with apartheid as one of my frames of reference. The other frame of reference is my first career, my first love was physics, specifically particle physics theory, which is the Feynman diagram at the bottom. And again, that's given me a couple of lenses, and in particular, one of the lenses is the necessity of using the right equations to describe the statistics of the world that we're in, and understanding that if you use the wrong equations, you're not actually describing the world we live in, you're describing a fantasy world, and then you shouldn't be surprised if the way you're trying to navigate based on statistics and so on leads you astray. So that's me. At the heart of everything we're doing in Evolutesix, as I said, is centered around the how. And we look at the how across these 6 strata, and the recognition that we need to have a how in each of the strata that is fit for purpose and is coherent across all of the strata. Anything that deviates from what is a fit for purpose and coherent how is, no matter how well intentioned it's being done, is likely to end up as regen washing. And this is something I'm noticing emerging more and more over the past couple of years. Well-intentioned people who are doing their very best to contribute to a regenerative economy, but still using the hows, the materials, the mechanisms, the techniques of the degenerative economy. So what does that look like? So to have a degenerative versus regenerative global economy, stratum 6, at stratum 5, which is the layer where investing happens, anything that is based on multiple investors, each running a portfolio, investing into multiple companies as a portfolio, and where each company has multiple investors, that is almost always going to be degenerative. So a clear signal that you're heading towards regen washing is if it's a portfolio that claims it's regenerative. It's almost certainly not actually regenerative because it doesn't have the how. And what I'll come into a little bit in a moment, portfolios make the statistical error of not recognizing the true nature of reality. In other words, they're fully exposed to what we term the losses of non-ergodic statistics, whereas actually to make something regenerative, investing needs to happen in ecosystems that can make the statistics ergodic. Now, probably nobody in here has heard that, apart from people who've heard me speak before, who have read my book. Don't get hung up on that. That we will unpack in a separate occasion. Stratum 4 is the level of incorporation. Whenever you hear the word ownership in connection with a company, it lacks the fundamental foundation needed to be regenerative or part of a regenerative ecosystem. As Tanuja has stressed, life equals regenerative equals agency. And so we have to incorporate as an agentic company, truly recognizing what is actually written in law, which is that the company is a legal person and has the rights and powers of any other legal person, whether that is a human legal person, a country as a legal person, or whatever. Companies are not owned, they are persons. And this myth that a company is owned is one of the biggest drivers of having a needlessly degenerative economy. Stratum 3, if it's a near static structure, won't be regenerative. It needs to be agentic and fluid. Stratum 2, interpersonal interactions. If we design companies as a clockwork of people, it won't be regenerative. The interpersonal needs to be agentic and developmental. And the foundation, the interpersonal, in a degenerative economy, people's inner lives and inner development are viewed as a distraction, something to manage away. Actually, that's where we need full agency, because that's the source of meaning. So to make it a little bit more clear, and then I'll wrap up. So we have to incorporate for agency. Ownership is a key root cause. And for well over a decade now, heading towards 15 years, we've been incorporating around the world agentic companies. We've also called it Fair Shares Commons companies, developed together with Rory Ridley Duff at the University of Sheffield, which include all capitals of stakeholders. Stewardship is embedded in there. Everyone has governance rights, including nature and future generations. It's explicitly not ownable. It's explicitly a free being because it's a commons, and all capitals share in wealth surplus. And this is an ongoing status. An agentic corporation is designed to change and evolve over time to maintain its relationality with all of the other companies around it, to come into an ecosystem of companies. And that is critical in order to stop the losses caused by the ergodicity error that pervades neoclassical economics, modern portfolio theory, and pretty much everything around how folk in the West deal with life. And you can see the difference. This is, and I'll dive into this in more detail in June, illustrates the difference between exactly the same companies, either invested in as an ergodic ecosystem, the solid lines, or invested in as 4 different portfolios, the dashed lines. And you can see just how much more money is available to use for regenerative outcomes at a fixed ROI. And so this is the way we can deliver regeneration across all of the capitals without favoring any of the capitals, including financial. And so I'll close with the key message is, to thrive, we must cease the myth of investors owning companies, and we must cease making the ergodicity error. And at the heart of that is recognizing that nothing can be regenerative unless everything that is living has agency. And the company is nothing other than a superorganism. It's alive, it's a living being where every cell is an individual human being. Lots more in my 2 books, lots more in my YouTube videos. And every so often I post something on LinkedIn where you can find more about